Welcome back, everyone, and if you're new here, I'm so glad you found the channel. We're on an exciting journey to reach 10k subscribers by next year, and every like, comment and subscription brings us one step closer. Your support means everything. Now, let's jump into today's video. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was half asleep in my observatory, the October wind howling outside like a wounded animal. My name is Dr. Alex Thompson, and until 6 months ago, I was just another amateur astronomer with too much time and money invested in my hobby. Now, I'm not sure if I'll live to see next month. My observatory sits on a ridge in rural Colorado, far enough from Denver that the light pollution doesn't interfere with my observations. It's a modest setup by professional standards, a converted barn with a retractable roof and enough computing power to make any tech enthusiast jealous. After leaving my job as a software engineer at a major tech company, I poured my savings into building this place, much to my family's concern. They thought I was having a midlife crisis. Maybe I was, but that night, everything changed. The computers were running my usual deep space scanning program, something I'd coded myself to search for unusual radio frequencies. Most nights, it picked up nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional satellite transmission. I was about to call it a night when my primary monitor lit up with an alert I'd never seen before. The signal was wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't match any known pattern in my database, and believe me, I had them all. Every satellite frequency, every known pulsar signature, even the theoretical patterns we might expect from various theoretical stellar phenomena. This was different. The signal appeared to be modulated, almost like it was encoded with information, but it used frequencies that shouldn't have been possible with current technology. I ran it through every analysis program I had. The pattern repeated exactly every 92.7 minutes, roughly the orbital period of a low Earth orbit satellite. But here's the thing. There wasn't supposed to be anything in that particular orbit. I checked every public database of satellite positions. Nothing. I even hacked into some less public databases, a skill from my previous life that I'm not proud of. Still, nothing. For 3 days straight, I tracked it. I barely slept, surviving on black coffee and the leftover lasagna my sister had brought over the weekend before. The signal remained consistent, perfectly timed, impossibly precise. No human-made satellite maintained that level of precision in its orbit. Our best technology showed at least some variation due to solar wind, gravitational influences and other factors. This thing, perfect, every single time. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. The Rocky Mountain stargazers met every Thursday night at the Boulder Community Observatory. We were an eclectic bunch, former NASA engineers, physics professors, tech entrepreneurs, and passionate amateurs. Most people would call us nerds. We preferred dedicated enthusiasts. I hadn't slept in almost 72 hours when I walked into the meeting, my laptop clutched under my arm like a lifeline. The familiar faces around the conference table looked up as I entered. Maya Patel, her dark hair tied back in her usual messy bun, was already setting up her quantum computing models on the main projection screen. James Wilson, our resident NASA whistleblower, though he hated that term, was arguing with Dr. Rebecca Anderson about the latest SpaceX launch telemetry data. "You look like hell, Alex," Maya said, not looking up from her computer. She had a way of being brutally honest while somehow remaining endearing. Her work in quantum computing had made her somewhat famous in certain circles, though she rarely talked about it. "I found something," I said, dropping my laptop on the table with a thud that made James wince, "and I need you all to tell me I'm not losing my mind." For the next hour, I walked them through everything I'd discovered. The signal, the orbital pattern, the impossible precision. James's usual skeptical expression gradually shifted to concern as I showed him the frequency analyses. Rebecca, ever the methodical scientist, demanded to see my raw data, then ran it through her own algorithms. Maya was unusually quiet, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she ran the numbers through her quantum modelling software. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "This isn't ours." "What do you mean, not ours?" Rebecca asked, though I could tell from her expression that she already knew. "Not human," Maya clarified, turning her screen around to show us a complex visualization. The signal modulation uses patterns that shouldn't be possible with current technology. The precision alone suggests capabilities at least a century beyond our current level. And look at this. She pointed to a recurring pattern in the data. "This isn't random noise. It's a language." James had gone pale. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen him look genuinely frightened. He'd worked communications at NASA for 20 years before retiring early. He'd never said why, but there had always been rumours. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. "In '83, we weren't supposed to. They made us." He stopped, running a hand through his grey hair. "We need to be very careful about what we do next." "Why?" I asked, but I already felt a chill running down my spine. "Because," James said, "if you've found what I think you found, they're already watching us." The next 3 weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless data analysis. Maya had transformed her garage into a makeshift command centre, filling it with computers she'd borrowed from her old lab. The walls were covered in printouts of signal patterns and orbital calculations. The air smelled of ozone and coffee, and the hum of cooling fans was constant. We worked in shifts, tracking the signal around the clock. Rebecca had reprogrammed the Boulder Observatory's main telescope to track the object's orbit, though we still couldn't get a visual confirmation. Whatever it was, it didn't reflect light like a normal satellite. It was as if it absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Another impossibility to add to our growing list. Maya's custom tracking software was a masterpiece of programming. She'd combined quantum algorithms with traditional signal processing in ways I'd never seen before. The 3D visualization of the orbit slowly took shape on her main screen, a perfect ellipse that shouldn't have existed. "Look at this," she said one night, pointing to a new pattern she'd isolated. "The signal isn't just repeating, it's evolving. Each cycle contains more information than the last, but in a way that's so subtle, you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it." "Like it's learning," Rebecca mused, leaning closer to the screen, "or testing our ability to detect the changes." James had been quiet lately, spending most of his time going through old NASA documents. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his phone with a worried expression, quickly putting it away when he noticed anyone watching. That night, he finally told us why. "In 1983, I was working late at the Deep Space Network facility in Madrid," he began, his voice low. "We picked up something similar, different frequency but the same impossible precision. Within hours, men in suits arrived. They took our data, our equipment, everything. Made us sign documents. But before they did, I saw something in the signal analysis. A pattern that matched what Maya found." He pulled out an old notebook, its pages yellow with age. The calculations and diagrams inside were faded, but still legible. As we compared them to our current data, the room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The patterns were identical. That's when the power went out, plunging us into darkness. In the sudden silence, we could hear something humming overhead, a sound that made our teeth ache and our heads spin. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, James's notebook was gone. Maya's computers had rebooted, but something was different. On her main screen, a single line of text appeared. "We see you watching. Keep watching. You'll understand soon." The message disappeared before anyone could take a photo or screenshot. Maya's system logs showed no record of it ever existing. But we all saw it, and we all knew. Whatever we'd found, it had found us too. That night, as I drove home along dark mountain roads, I noticed a black SUV following me. It stayed 3 cars back, perfectly matching my speed. When I took a random turn down a side street, it disappeared, but I knew it wouldn't be the last time I'd see it. We were onto something massive, something that powerful people, or things, had kept hidden for decades. And now we were part of it, whether we wanted to be or not. The question was, how far could we push before they pushed back? Little did we know, we were about to find out. After the incident at Maya's garage, we knew we couldn't continue working from our usual locations. Rebecca suggested her late father's cabin in the Rockies, remote enough to avoid surveillance, with a generator for power and a satellite internet connection we could modify. The irony of using satellite internet to track our mysterious satellite wasn't lost on us. The cabin's living room became our war room. Maya's equipment hummed in every corner, with cables snaking across the hardwood floors like mechanical vines. The stone fireplace was covered in printouts of signal data, and the dining table had disappeared under layers of star charts and orbital calculations. "Look at this," Maya said one evening, her face illuminated by multiple screens. She hadn't slept in 2 days, sustained by a combination of energy drinks and determination. The encryption isn't just complex, it's adaptive. Every time we crack one layer, it evolves. She showed us the decryption progress on her main monitor. The patterns twisted and shifted like living things, forming structures that seemed to defy the laws of information theory. Traditional encryption used mathematical principles. This was something else entirely. James leaned forward, squinting at the display. "That sequence," he muttered, pointing to a recurring pattern. "I've seen it before, in the NASA Deep Space Communications protocols." "That's impossible," Rebecca interjected. "Those protocols weren't developed until the 90s. James shook his head. "No, they were reverse engineered from something we found in the 80s, something they never told the public about." As if responding to his words, the cabin's lights flickered. The generator outside coughed once, then died. In the sudden darkness, our equipment screens cast an eerie blue glow across the room. Through the windows, we could see the constellation Orion, and something else, a point of light moving too fast, too precisely to be natural. When the power returned moments later, Maya's decryption program had made an unexpected breakthrough. A string of text appeared on her screen. Probability of detection, 100%. Response protocol, initiated. Human comprehension, accelerating. Below the text was a sequence of numbers that made James go white as a sheet. "Those are coordinates," he whispered, "for every nuclear silo in the Western Hemisphere." The implications hit us like a physical blow. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just watching us. It had access to our most sensitive military information. And now it knew that we knew. James finally told us everything he knew. In 1983, he'd been part of a classified NASA project, analyzing deep space signals. One night they detected something that defied explanation, a signal with characteristics identical to what we were seeing now. Within hours, a group calling themselves the Office of Special Projects took over the facility. They weren't normal government types, James explained, his hands shaking as he poured himself a drink. They knew things, details about the signal we hadn't even discovered yet. It was like they'd been expecting it. He pulled out an old photograph from his wallet. It showed a younger version of himself standing with a group of scientists in front of a massive radio telescope. 3 of the faces had been burned out of the photo. These 3, he tapped the burned spots. They were the ones who figured out what the signal meant. Dr. Thomas Reed, Dr. Lisa Kumar, and Dr. David Phillips. Within a month, they were all dead. Reed died in a car accident. Kumar disappeared while hiking. Phillips supposedly had a heart attack at age 38. "And you didn't think to mention this earlier?" I demanded. "Would you have believed me?" James shot back. "Besides, I signed documents. They made it very clear what would happen if I ever talked." Rebecca had been quiet, focusing on her laptop. "You need to see this," she said suddenly. She turned the screen toward us. It showed a series of newspaper articles from 1983, each describing strange phenomena. Unexplained power outages, compass needles spinning wildly, and electronic devices activating without human input. The dates, Maya noticed immediately. They all correspond to times when the signal was strongest in James's old data. The cabin's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Outside, an owl screeched, the sound unnaturally loud. In the mountain silence, the black SUV I'd seen following me was now appearing in everyone's rearview mirrors. Rebecca's lab had been broken into, though nothing was taken. Maya's personal devices were acting strangely, turning on by themselves, showing fragments of text that disappeared too quickly to read. We were being watched, not just by whoever was in those SUVs, but by something else, something that could reach into our lives through every electronic device we owned. The deeper we dug, the more disturbing our discoveries became. Rebecca found classified documents about space missions from the 80s, missions that officially never happened. The files were heavily censored, but certain phrases kept appearing: non-terrestrial object, autonomous response patterns, and Project Echelon Watch. Maya's quantum decryption program had begun producing results that defied explanation. The satellite wasn't just sending signals, it was receiving them too, from points so distant our best telescopes couldn't detect their source. The communication pattern suggested a vast network, with our mysterious satellite serving as just one node in an incomprehensibly large system. One night, as a storm raged outside the cabin, we received our first direct contact. It came through every device, simultaneously. Phones, laptops, even Maya's encrypted systems. The message was simple but chilling. Your species' observation is premature but predicted. Continue your analysis. Understanding brings consequence. Choice approaches. The next morning, we discovered that every major space agency in the world had simultaneously adjusted their satellite tracking data. Thousands of orbital paths were subtly modified in their historical records. They were erasing something from history right in front of our eyes. That's when the anonymous messages started arriving. The first came from someone claiming to be a former NASA engineer. "What you found goes deeper than you know. It's not just NASA. Every space agency knows. They've known since 1957. Sputnik 1 wasn't the first artificial satellite in Earth's orbit, but they can't hide it much longer. The signal is getting stronger. They're preparing for something. Find Dr. Phillips's daughter. She has her father's research, but be careful. You're not the only ones looking for it." James was able to confirm that Dr. Phillips had indeed had a daughter. She was now a quantum physics professor at a small university in Maine, but when we tried to contact her, we discovered she'd taken an unexpected sabbatical 2 days after we'd started decoding the signal. The coincidences were becoming too numerous to ignore. Every lead we pursued, every person we tried to contact, every piece of evidence we uncovered, it was like something was staying one step ahead of us, redirecting or removing anything that might lead us to the full truth. But we had something they didn't expect. Maya's quantum decryption program was evolving faster than anyone could have predicted. It was learning from the satellite's communication patterns, growing more sophisticated with each passing hour. We were getting close to something big. We could feel it. That night, as we gathered around the cabin's fireplace, discussing our next move, all of our devices displayed the same image for a fraction of a second. A star map showing a region of space that shouldn't have been visible from Earth. The game was changing. We were no longer just observers. We had become participants in something far beyond our comprehension. And somewhere, in the darkness between the stars, something was watching our every move, counting down to a moment we couldn't yet understand. The real question was, when that moment arrived, would humanity be ready for the consequences of our discovery? The first signs of worldwide change were subtle. Rebecca noticed it while analysing global weather data. Patterns that defied meteorological models. Storms that moved with unnatural precision. At first, we thought we were being paranoid, seeing connections where none existed. We were wrong. In late November, a series of synchronized events caught our attention. Within a 24-hour period, 3 world leaders made unprecedented policy reversals. A Category 5 hurricane suddenly changed course, avoiding Miami, but devastating an area of the Florida coast that housed a secret military installation. Worldwide telecommunications experienced a 3-minute interruption that no one could explain. Maya's monitoring equipment was working overtime, correlating these events with the satellite's signal patterns. The signal strength peaks exactly 12 minutes before each major event, she explained, showing us the data. Her usual composure was cracking. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. It's not just watching anymore. It's directing. The cabin's main room had become a situation center, with multiple screens displaying news feeds, weather maps, and signal data. James had created a global event tracker, marking each anomaly with a red pin on a digital map. The pattern that emerged was chilling. The events formed a perfect geometric shape when connected, centered on a point in the Pacific Ocean where no landmass existed. Then came the first direct message from the satellite. It manifested simultaneously on every screen in the cabin, bypassing all security protocols. Phase 1 analysis. Complete indigenous capability exceeding preliminary estimates. Intervention protocols. Adjusting time remaining diminishing. The message was followed by a series of images. Satellite photos of locations around the world, each marked with a countdown timer. As we watched, the first timer reached 0. Seconds later, news alerts reported a massive sinkhole appearing in that exact location, swallowing a research facility in Norway. The facility's purpose was classified, but James's contacts suggested it had housed quantum computing experiments. The surveillance became more overt. Maya discovered backdoors in her systems that shouldn't have been possible. Her quantum encryption had been bypassed like it was primitive code. Her personal laptop started displaying fragments of her own memories, photos she'd never taken, diary entries she'd never written, yet describing events she remembered. "They're not just watching our technology," she whispered one evening, her voice trembling. "They're watching our thoughts." James began experiencing severe headaches whenever he worked with certain frequencies. During one analysis session, his nose started bleeding and he collapsed. At the hospital, the CT scan showed nothing abnormal, but the imaging machine malfunctioned during the procedure, displaying impossible structures within his brain for a fraction of a second. Rebecca's research lab at the university was compromised. She arrived one morning to find her entire team gathered around a whiteboard covered in equations none of them remembered writing. The equations described a propulsion system that violated known laws of physics, yet preliminary tests suggested they might work. The most disturbing development affected me personally. I began having vivid dreams of conversations with myself, except the other version of me knew things I couldn't possibly know. He spoke of events yet to happen, decisions yet to be made. Each morning, I'd wake to find one of his predictions had come true. During a particularly tense night of monitoring, Maya's quantum tracking system detected something unprecedented. The satellite was no longer alone. Hundreds of similar signals had appeared, somehow masked until that moment, forming a web around the Earth. It's been building a network, Maya explained, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tracked the new signals. Every time we discovered one aspect of its capabilities, it revealed another. It's like it's teaching us, but only what it wants us to know. James, still pale from his hospital visit, studied the pattern of satellites. This formation, it's identical to the placement of ancient megalithic sites around the world. The correlation is mathematically perfect. How long have they been up there? Rebecca wondered aloud. How long have they been guiding us? The revelation of the satellite network changed everything. Using Maya's enhanced tracking system, we began to understand the true scope of what we were dealing with. The satellites formed an intricate geometric pattern around Earth, creating what Maya called a quantum mesh of unprecedented complexity. Each satellite seemed to have a specific function. Some focused on weather patterns, others on geological activity, and still others on human population centers. But the most disturbing ones appeared to monitor human brainwave patterns on a massive scale. During one late-night analysis session, we discovered something that made our blood run cold. The network wasn't just passive, it was actively modifying Earth's electromagnetic field. Minor changes, almost imperceptible, but with profound effects on human behavior and natural systems. "Look at this," Rebecca said, pointing to a correlation she'd discovered. Every major technological breakthrough in the last 40 years occurred within days of peak network activity. The internet, quantum computing, AI advancement, all of them aligned with specific satellite configurations. The implications were staggering. Humanity's technological progress hadn't been entirely our own. We were being guided, shaped, prepared for something. Then came the dreams. Not just mine anymore. Everyone in the team started experiencing them. Shared visions of impossible cities, technologies beyond human comprehension, and a countdown clock that seemed to hover at the edge of consciousness. Maya was the first to realize the dreams were synchronized with specific network configurations. "They're not just dreams," she explained, showing us the correlation data. "They're downloads. The network is preparing us for direct communication." The next phase began without warning. At exactly midnight on the winter solstice, every electronic device on Earth flickered. In that instant, countless people reported seeing the same symbol, a complex geometric pattern that seemed to move in impossible ways. Those with specialized knowledge, scientists, engineers, mathematicians, found themselves understanding concepts that had previously been beyond human comprehension. We were watching the greatest revelation in human history unfold, but we were also watching our own independence slip away. The network wasn't just monitoring humanity, it was actively directing our evolution. That's when we received the final message from the original satellite, the one we'd first discovered. It appeared as a holographic projection in the center of our cabin. Final phase initiated observer status, terminated integration, beginning choice now. The projection expanded, showing us visions of two possible futures. One where humanity accepted the network's guidance, advancing rapidly into a Type 2 civilization. And another where we maintained our independence, facing the consequences of our own choices. But we were starting to understand the truth. This wasn't really a choice at all. The network had been influencing us for so long, preparing us for this moment, that our decision had been shaped decades before we knew we'd have to make it. As the hologram faded, we realized we weren't just observers anymore. We had become the focal point of a plan centuries in the making, and somewhere, in the vast network above us, something was waiting to see what we would do next. The question was no longer whether we were alone in the universe. The question was, had we ever truly been alone at all? The cabin had become our fortress and our prison. Outside, the winter storms raged with unnatural fury. while inside we grappled with revelations that threatened to shatter our understanding of reality. Maya's quantum systems had evolved beyond her ability to control them, displaying data that shouldn't have been possible to collect. "The network isn't just a monitoring system," Maya announced one morning, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "It's a consciousness, a distributed alien intelligence that's been watching us, guiding us for longer than human civilization has existed." Her screens displayed an analysis that defied comprehension. The satellite network wasn't just communicating, it was thinking, processing information at a scale that made our most advanced supercomputers look like pocket calculators. The geometric pattern they formed wasn't just for surveillance, it was a vast neural network, with Earth itself as a central processing node. James had recovered from his hospital stay, but something had changed in him. He could perceive patterns in the data that even Maya's quantum systems missed. "They've been modifying us," he explained, sketching complex diagrams that seemed to flow from his hand without conscious thought. "Not our bodies, our minds. Every generation slightly more attuned to their frequency, slightly more capable of understanding their technology." Rebecca's research had uncovered evidence that every major leap in human consciousness, the sudden emergence of complex language, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the digital age, coincided with specific configurations of the satellite network. "We didn't evolve naturally," she said. "We were cultivated." That's when we received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Phillips's daughter hadn't disappeared. She'd been watching us, waiting to see if we'd discover what her father had learned decades ago. She arrived at the cabin during a break in the storm, carrying a briefcase full of her father's original research. "Dad knew," she told us, spreading out yellowed papers covered in complex calculations. "He knew they weren't just studying us, they were preparing us. Each generation a little smarter, a little more connected, a little closer to being ready." "Ready for what?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. "For joining them." The truth was more complex than we could have imagined. The network wasn't a single alien intelligence. It was an interface between humanity and a collective of civilizations spanning multiple galaxies. Earth wasn't just being observed, it was being evaluated for membership. Dr. Phillips's research revealed that certain humans had been directly connected to the network for years. World leaders, scientific pioneers, cultural icons. Many were receiving subtle guidance, their decisions influenced by the collective intelligence above. Some were willing participants, others were completely unaware of the influence. Maya discovered that her quantum computing breakthroughs hadn't been entirely her own work. The network had been subtly guiding her research, preparing the technology that would eventually allow direct communication between human and alien consciousness. The evidence was everywhere once we knew where to look. The mysterious development of ancient megalithic sites, the unexplained leaps in human knowledge, the seemingly impossible accuracies of certain ancient astronomical calculations, all were products of the network's guidance. But there was resistance. We weren't the only ones who had discovered the truth. A coalition of government agencies and private organizations had been fighting the network's influence for decades. They believed any alien guidance, no matter how beneficial, was a form of invasion. Through James's NASA connections, we learned of a planned operation to disable key satellites in the network. The coalition had developed technology they believed could sever the connection between humanity and the alien intelligence. They didn't understand that humanity's connection to the network was no longer just technological. It was biological, psychological, fundamental to what we had become. The final confrontation began on a moonless night in December. The coalition launched their attack on the network, using experimental weapons designed to disrupt quantum entanglement. They didn't realize they were attacking what had become humanity's collective nervous system. The effects were immediate and devastating. Worldwide, people experienced intense headaches, disorientation, and a profound sense of loss. The network's response was equally dramatic. The sky lit up with aurora-like displays as hundreds of previously invisible satellites revealed themselves. In our cabin command center, Maya's systems were overloading with data. The network was no longer hiding its true nature. Through our screens, we watched as quantum connections between human minds and alien intelligence became visible, revealing a web of consciousness that spanned the globe. Dr. Phillips's daughter worked frantically to decode the massive data stream pouring from her father's research. They're not just watching us, she realized. They're protecting us. The network is a shield. There are things out there in the darkness between galaxies that humanity isn't ready to face alone. The Coalition's attack reached its peak. Several satellites went dark, and for a moment it seemed they might succeed. That's when we made our decision. Using Maya's quantum systems and the knowledge from Dr. Phillips's research, we broadcast the truth, not just to the Coalition, but to everyone. Through every connected device on Earth, we showed humanity what the network really was. Not an invasion, but an invitation. Not a prison, but a path to the stars. The choice had always been ours, but only once we understood what we were choosing. I'm writing this account 1 year after what historians now call the Revelation. The Coalition's attack failed, but it forced the network to reveal itself fully. Humanity could no longer deny the reality of our situation. We had never been alone, and our development had never been entirely our own. The transition hasn't been easy. Some resist the idea of alien guidance, preferring isolation to integration. Others embrace it too fully, losing themselves in the vast consciousness that the network offers access to. We're learning to find a balance to maintain our humanity while reaching for something greater. Maya's quantum computing work has advanced decades beyond what should have been possible. She's developing interfaces that allow direct communication with the network, though the experiences are often overwhelming. James has become something of a translator, his mind altered by his earlier exposure to the network, able to bridge the gap between human and alien thought. Rebecca leads a new scientific initiative studying the physical changes occurring in human beings who work closely with the network. The evolution that was once subtle and slow has accelerated. Each new generation shows greater capacity for connecting with the alien intelligence, greater understanding of concepts that once seemed impossible. Dr. Phillips's daughter continues her father's work, now openly supported by a unified global scientific community. The network itself has become more direct in its communications, though much of what it shares is still beyond our comprehension. As for me, I still spend my nights in my observatory, but I'm no longer just watching the stars. I'm watching humanity take its first real steps into a universe that's both more wonderful and more terrifying than we ever imagined. The network's final warning stays with me. We are not alone, but we are also not ready. What we discovered wasn't just an alien satellite. It was a glimpse of our own potential, and a reminder that evolution isn't always natural. Sometimes it's guided by hands we can't see, toward a future we can't fully comprehend. The choice was never whether to join them or not. The choice was whether to accept what we're becoming, what we've always been becoming. Something more than human, yet human still. They're still up there, watching, waiting, guiding. And now we're watching too, eyes finally open to the truth about our place in the cosmic dance. The question is no longer whether we'll reach the stars. It's who we'll be when we get there. Some nights, when the sky is clear and the stars seem close enough to touch, I swear I can feel the network's presence. It's not just satellites anymore. It's a promise of what's to come. And somewhere, in the vast intelligence that spans the galaxies, something is smiling at how far we've come, and how far we have yet to go. The truth about the alien satellite wasn't that NASA had hidden it from us. The truth was that it had hidden us from ourselves until we were ready to see what we truly are. A species on the brink of becoming something extraordinary, taking our first steps into an infinity we're only beginning to understand. The signal is still there, stronger than ever, and now finally we know how to listen.